Hello, my friends. It is Monday, and it is the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you, Star Wars nerds. I hope you had a good weekend, and I am happy that you are here because I have a great conversation with an excellent first-time guest who is just so brilliant. I've already learned so much from preparing to talk to her and reading her book. Atima Omara is my guest today. She was one of Ebony Magazine's Power 100. She's the president and chief strategist of Omara Strategy Group. She is first generation American to Ugandan mom and dad who sound amazing. She talks about them in our conversation today, and she's written a new book. It's called The Instigators: How Black Women Have Been Essential to American Democracy and What We Can Learn from Them. Really excited to share this conversation with you today. Unfortunately, I don't have your normal daily news headlines and clips, but I do plan to be back on the normal schedule tomorrow. That's Tuesday the 5th with your news and clips and a full show. I also will be sharing a couple of other interviews that I've racked up over the past few days, including with comedians Mike Kaplan and JL Covan. I'll drop those later on today. But right now, my conversation with Atima Omara, which I really enjoyed. I hope that she'll be joining us again here on the show. I learned so much from her, and there might be a few moments during this interview where I kind of virtue signal. It gets a little weird and cringy, but I do it so that you don't have to, so that I can get the answers to the questions that I truly have in this case for this brilliant black woman. And when we talk about race and being a white man, this is just a really important conversation for the non-melanated, as she says, and it's a great book for us too. I learned a lot. I think you will too. I hope you'll go reach out to her and let her know that you enjoyed this because this is her first time on. She also has her own podcast, which somehow I didn't learn in my prep to talk to her. It's called Embracing Your Voice, embracingyourvoicepod.com. She's on her 4th season, I believe, and I've just subscribed to it on Apple and Spotify. You can too. Here is my conversation with Atima Omara just hours after the Supreme Court decided to gut the rest of the Voting Rights Act. Tough timing, but important nonetheless. Here we go.
The Supreme Court came down and further gutted the Voting Rights Act. And even without this decision, it was already pretty bad. How do you see what had the rights won through the civil rights movement of the 60s and the rights lost since was the Shelby County decision in 2010? That's how I kind of bookend it. Maybe it was 13, but either way, that's how I kind of bookend it. But how do you look at the Voting Rights Act and where we're at today with it?
Okay, so with the Voting Rights Act of 65, and some of my research, especially for the book, and I had to talk about this, is that it really expanded. It expanded voting rights for Black people and other people of color in the country, and certainly Indigenous and Latino, who may have had voting restrictions before, but it primarily enfranchised a whole swath of Black people in the South who had literally been denied the right to vote through Jim Crow policies. So when the Voting Rights Act of 65 passed, that dramatically closed the voting gap between white people and Black people. I think after 65, and I think when they came back a few years later to look at the numbers from like 30%. So it went down to 8% voting gap between Black and white voters. That was just because the Voting Rights Act was put into place. So then over the years, especially by the 80s and Reagan, lots more sneaky ways around trying to get around this by, some sneaky voter suppression tactics like closing polls early, not letting people know about changes, making it harder to register. But a lot of the strength of the bill was still there. It still passed in a bipartisan way. But obviously this new ilk of conservatives in the last 30 some odd years were like, all right, seeing the writing on the wall that a more multiracial democracy ends very much their project of a white Christian nationalist nation with a certain set of elites at the top. They really got aggressive about it. John Roberts he was a lawyer in the Reagan administration, and Voting Rights Act was like the thing that was his moonshot, was to gut that. And he wrote briefs, I think, at that time to do that. So 2013 Shelby v. Holder, there was like a thing called pre-clearance, and I think it was Section 5, if I recall. And that particular pre-clearance it stopped Southern states from sending in maps that were just gerrymandered to all heck, but specifically like any type of unusual restrictions to voting, like we're going to have a really restrictive voter ID law. And so Shelby v. Holder ruled in favor of Shelby versus Holder, was our Attorney General at the time, Eric Holder, under the Obama administration. And the immediate effect of that was in the 2014 elections, where Texas immediately put into place their voting ID restrictive laws. North Carolina passed one of the most restrictive, and in the country that same year, which ended same-day registration, which limited early vote, and had really stringent voter ID requirements. Unsurprisingly, 2014 was also the same year that we lost the U.S. Senate and North Carolina. We lost the North Carolina U.S. Senate election by like a hair. So the impacts, not the legal mind, because I didn't go to law school, but I understand the impacts electorally and what that means for the voting and democratic project, which is this additional thing today will make it even harder for Black and brown elected officials to get elected and be represented, like Black and brown voters to actually elect people who reflect their districts because of the way the maps are going to be drawn, which is another provision of the Voting Rights Act.
It's so bad for so many reasons, but the only thing I would kind of add to your great description of all of it and taking us through it is back when George W. Bush was president in 2006, and you did mention this, but the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized by the U.S. Senate unanimously, 98-0. Every Republican senator voted for it. So that was 20 years ago, and here we are with the Voting Rights Act gutted. And then I guess I have a shitty metaphor, which is like there was this really hairpin turn on a mountain road and cars kept going off it. So they put up a guardrail and then no cars went off of it. They didn't hit the guardrail. And so then they said, you know what? No cars are hitting the guardrail anymore. Let's take it down. And then cars immediately started careening off. Again, I said it was a shitty metaphor. I just thought of it. It does no justice to the people voting rights, Black and brown people. The point is that's really what they did. They immediately passed racist laws in Texas and other states as soon as John Roberts gutted Section 5, and then further again, and then once again today.
Well, and I mean, like, the gall of it is for them to say in their decisions, Roberts and all of them, well, we've made lots of leaps and bounds and racial discrimination in the laws, and it's all over. Yes, because we have these guardrails in place. So your car metaphor is
flawed,
as shitty as you think.
It's just cars versus human lives, and I guess but everything is reactionary these days for sure. Okay, so I want to get into your book, which is super interesting and really great, and I'm so glad you read it and I wrote it. I'm so glad so many people get to read it because it's super important for a lot of reasons. It's a kind of needed, I think, research for today to see where we're at. But before I get to the book, just a couple questions about you. You are first generation American. Your parents immigrated here from Uganda.
Yes.
You grew up where in the States, and how did you arrive in any way to politics and advocacy?
Yeah, so born in Providence, Rhode Island. Shout out to Providence.
Oh, okay.
And Rhode Island, lovely state. And then family moved south when I was a kid, and that's where I've lived the rest of my life, like 6 or 7 years old. And I grew up in Southern Virginia. And the Virginia we know now, which all of these progressive policies have just passed, first Southern state to pass paid family leave, ended their death penalty practice after being the state that actually killed most people on death row, legalized marijuana, passed a lot of criminal justice reform policies, has an actual Voting Rights Act that was similar, on the state level, that is similar to the Voting Rights Act federally. That didn't exist when I was a kid. Very much Virginia was the state that you felt that it was very much formally the home of the Confederacy, the capital of the Confederacy when my family moved there. And my dad taught at a local Black university, historically Black college and university, Virginia State. And my mother was a nurse. And I think growing up in that world and really seeing in real time the impacts of a state that had fought against desegregation, had fought against a lot of advancement in building a multiracial democracy. And championed Robert E. Lee and had until recently, till 2021, had one of the biggest statues in commemoration of him in not downtown Richmond, but in the historical part of Richmond that's now taken down, which I opened my book with talking about that. It really shaped me and my politics, seeing how my family, was treated as Black people, but then also as folks who had foreign names, having family members that were disabled and seeing how they were treated by the system and, realizing, okay, if you're not at the table, you're definitely on the menu. I grew up, thankfully, in a household that even though they were recent immigrants to the country, they really made sure I understood the history of the U.S. and that, yes, 1776 and Declaration of Independence and all of that, but that the history of the United States is a flawed one and not everybody, got their rights. And so, I became such a student of that at a young age and really understanding and respecting the people who made it possible for folks like myself and my family to thrive here in the U.S. and wanted to be part of continuing that project.
You've done a lot. You ran for office in Virginia over a decade ago. You were the first Black president of the Young Democrats of America. You earned a seat on the DNC's executive committee. You have written all kinds of articles and helped on all kinds of other campaigns. You've appeared on all the major television networks and outlets. What have you spent much of your career trying to accomplish, would you say? And how much, I almost want to say, how cynical are you about the system after being, witnessing so much of it? But I don't feel in reading your book that you necessarily are. There's a lot of hope and a way forward. But what have those experiences taught you about our political system? I think that's where I want to land on my question.
Yeah, one, that the changes to the political system, we cannot depend on one great election. That's definitely for sure. I think a lot of people especially when I think of 2008, and I think of 2012, and I even think of 2020 and how exuberant folks were. I feel like they got the country back. It is a continued project. Democracy is a team sport. It is one where you have to be active and in it on a regular basis in whatever way you have the energy to be, but it's not one that you can just let lay to the side and then just check in only for the election. I think we were, as a country, sort of spoiled in that way because so many of the rights that we have now, and in some cases did, was because of all that work that had been done and had been, made it a much better, a true multiracial democracy after 65. And so, it's interesting. I wrote this book because I am trying to find a way to put some more perspective in the political conversation, one that is more nuanced, one that takes into account, hey, we can actually still build a better, more inclusive, multiracial democracy. There are people who have lived in harder times and have done the work. A lot of people sort of look at our two-party system, and I get it, having been involved at the local, state, and national.
I love to tell Black people that, by the way. It's been harder.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
they have to have more perspective. Things were harder for Black folks before now. So
yeah.
They love it.
And it's just, it's been harder. And really, I'm saying that to, the non-melanated folks who are reading it. I'm like, listen, it's been harder. And, for me as a Black person and talking to other Black people, I know we find guidance and hope from, all right, how did they find joy? How did they do this work? How did it last? And for the non-melanated folks who are reading it, I want them to realize, this is not new. Like whatever you were taught in your schools, if you were, not lucky enough to grow up in a household where truths were told, that it has been worse in this country. We have seen authoritarianism before in communities in the form of Jim Crow, in the form of slavery, in the form of multiple different policies that were restrictive of anybody who wasn't a white, wealthy, straight guy. And how do we truly build a project where everyone can thrive? And Black women are at the center of that in this story.
No doubt. And by the way, I'm writing a book sequel, picking up off your work, called Caucasity. And it's me, I'm not, but I should. It's me asking Black folks about the things that we do and say, whether well-meaning or just completely ignorant, because it's so often is like, especially with well-meaning folks who are trying to advocate, but, then get turned off because they've somehow offended. And that's why I've tried, I think, how do I see how this is going to come off? I'll just say it. Like, I've tried to make sure that I have a good cohort of Black women in my life who I can have honest conversations with, especially off the air, to filter caucasity. And as a result, like, I'm always learning things. Like, I'll make an assumption about what Black women probably think, for example, after Kamala Harris lost. I made a lot of assumptions. So I called up a few Black women. I'm like, what do you think? How are you feeling? And obviously Black women, Black people, anybody who's not monolithic. I think the Black women I talked to was like, I'm taking a break. I'm going to enjoy all of the things I love. My friend Karen's like, I'm going to watch detective shows for a couple of months. And then I saw that image that's now famous, and there's probably a few iterations of it, of a bunch of Black women who had kind of done the work on a skyscraper watching the city burn. It was like a cartoon. And those were two things that just really I never would have been able to arrive at had I not looked at the view through, in this case, Black women's experience and eyes. I think that's a lot of what your book does, because it helps take a look at Black women of the past and then specifically Black women right now, say 18 to 45. But I do think that's, I guess my question is, how is this book for white folks? I know it's for Black folks in terms of a lot of different things. It's certainly inspiring. It might be in terms of history you might not have seen and so on. And in a way, kind of a toolkit, but specifically for the less melanin folks. How is this for us, and how should we be sharing this with our white friends?
Yes, I wrote this with
the white people.
Yes. For the non-melanated folks, for the white people especially. I want them to read this because I was struck by a conversation. I was actually at I think it was a book talk with Shannon Watts of Moms Demand, founder of Moms Demand.
I know Shannon.
Yeah. Well, for our listeners who might probably your listeners will know who Shannon Watts is, but she has this wonderful following of white suburban women who I see themselves in her and, love her work. And she uses that audience well to like educate them and do the work. She led the White Women for Harris effort. Mm-hmm. And, I remember at one of her book talks, I was sitting at it and she said, a woman asked the question, like, how do you get the courage to like, I see these things on TV and it makes me angry, but like, how do you get the courage to really just put yourself out there? And I was so struck by that because, a lot of Black women didn't have that choice. I try to really highlight in the book, like, there are women who would have preferred to have just been like, go to their job and take care of their kids, or teenagers who just would have preferred to enjoy their teen years, who ended up finding themselves literally leading a strike, against the all white, school board and leadership of their county because their schools were literally falling apart on their heads while they're trying to learn. They wanted better school conditions. Like, I want white people to read this book and take it not only as a hopeful guide and practical tips, because that's the last chapter is really for anyone, But how can I contribute to the cause? How can I donate to the cause? How can I stand up with fellow instigators and support them in the work? How can I learn the lessons from them on how to be a better, not even ally, but accomplice, have some skin in this game to really build a better country and take some lessons. Literally, that's part of why the subtitle is what it is and what we can learn from them at the end, because I want folks to learn from those who have done it, who didn't have the choice, what is possible and what we need to do to build a more inclusive democracy.
Yeah, really well said and a great example. The question was to Shannon about where do you get the courage? Just to make sure. Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is like, it's a well-intentioned thing, but like black women, black folks, my mom was a public school teacher in Syracuse when in the 80s, and my mom's a white lady. Mm-hmm. And
figured.
Yeah, I don't know, because I look like a baby hamster.
Yeah.
But like she took like continuing ed courses that were like culturally sensitive, whatever, and like some black man PhD really made an impact on her when he said something like, every morning when I wake up, the first thing I think of is that I'm in this body and in this vessel. And what I'm hearing you saying around this question, like, how do you get the courage? It's like, to be a black person in America, to be a black woman especially, is to go to work, is to enter into this or that space, this or that room. It's always requires courage to a certain extent. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that what you mean without like, lambasting somebody, which you could be rightly to do? That's right. What you're saying.
Yeah. It requires courage. It requires thinking about survival in a way that, and fighting and making sort of the calculation of like, if I start this fight, if I fight for this thing, what is it going to cost me? Navigating police stopping you, and how do you deal with that? How are you being treated in the workplace? Am I going to lose my job today? But also that when it gets to be so much and you forget thriving, but your ability to survive is really hampered, it's all right. F it. Like, I need to survive. My family needs to survive. My community needs to survive. And I am going to dedicate my life to that effort. So there isn't really sort of there isn't a question for any of the women who are instigators, because, they've had to really, they've just been having to literally survive in a system that is very intent on pushing them to the margins.
I have a live chat going for those listening live, and I don't know why two of my friends are calling me out, but two women I know, Desiree and Rachel, both wrote drink, meaning I said something that I've said a lot, and I'm waiting for them to tell me. I thought my question was well done. Oh, baby hamster. Oh, okay, that's an old joke. Sorry. She hadn't heard it. You hadn't heard it. It was fine. I said my mom's white. The whole bit was great. So sorry, you guys. The Instigators is both the title of your book. Love the live chat. The Instigators is the name of your book. It's also the term you are using to refer to women, black women between the ages of 18 and 45. So I guess what is it that you have against black women over 45? She doesn't. She references them as guideposts, but that's the joke. And why is it that the cohort?
Yes. So one is going back to the fact that, I came into my political awareness early, and I established that in the book. And I talked to I realized in having a lot of interviews and conversations on my own podcast, Embracing Your Voice. If you all want to listen, it's plenty of 4 seasons for you all to listen to.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I was so focused on the book and everything else. We will listen. And subscribe. Yes.
Yes, embracing your voice.
Oh, I can't believe I didn't use that in my prep. I'm so embarrassed. Go ahead. Sorry.
And so I talk to women of color about how they kind of find ways to build careers and still thrive, not only survive, but thrive and be unapologetic themselves. And the number of times I always ask, how did you end up where you are? Almost every Black woman I talked to was like, yeah, I had no intention of ending up in advocacy or activism, which is a lot of women that I talk to. Yeah. They're like, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to, work at a nonprofit, maybe local in my community. It was just something very non-political, but they saw something, looked around and were like, this is effed. Who doing something? No one? Okay, I guess it's me. And it, we're pulling from, some of the most talented, in our each generation, because I say it's not just specifically like, Gen Z or millennials. It's, you see that cohort in each generation over the course of the history of this country where they're like, this effed, what, who's doing something? Like Ida B. Wells grew up in a family that did fairly well for themselves. And it wasn't until, she saw a couple of her friends who were upstanding citizens, had a small business in Jim Crow South and were doing very well, be lynched, that she was like, wait a minute. What did they do? What are we doing about this? And she became, a prolific journalist, investigative journalist around how lynching was used to terrorize Black men and even Black women in the communities post, slavery and in the Jim Crow era. And so that's really what I was trying to tie into. And I pull stories of, Black women. You'd think about, I'm trying to think of who really stuck out of my mind when it really hit me that this was a theme. Marsha P. Johnson, as many know, was present at Stonewall, Black trans woman. And she's sort of credited with being part of that initial uprising at the Stonewall uprising in 1969 that really pushed against continued arrests and beatings of Black, well, not even Black, but queer and trans and non-binary people. But they were, unsurprisingly, the police were hardest on Black folks specifically, Black and brown folks specifically. And it's not surprising when I read it that she was 23 years old when that happened. Damn. Most of the time when we're looking at these legends that we celebrate, we're showing photos of them when they were much older. But I'm like, oh yeah, you were 23. No wonder you had that sense of outrage. You had that sense of injustice that a lot of young people have. And you were like, F this. We have been putting up with this for so long. And, let her into her life of activism. And that's the case for a lot of the folks that I cite in the book.
Yeah. And you cite so many great ones that are currently doing all kinds of great work. Women that we talk about every day, currently in Congress, of course, Jasmine Crockett, Ilhan Omar, and so many more. Angela Ashbrooks. Who was it the other day who asked RFK?
Was it?
About his quote about putting Black kids into some kind of camp or something. But to my question about that is, Black folks, Black women it's nothing new to have to be dealing with powerful, racist white men. But it does seem new maybe for this generation because it was getting a little better.
Yeah.
But there are so many overt. Obviously, Donald Trump on down to your favorite YouTuber, to RFK Jr., frankly, and some of the things that he said. Just so many others that sometimes even us white folks, a lot of us white folks, I'll say, are just our breath is taken away, maybe more than Black folks, for sure, because we can't believe this was just uttered by a white man in power. Mm-hmm. Trump has directly attacked so many Black women. My friend Joy Reid, so many and so often. And so the question is what are these new levels of attack coming from overwhelmingly right-wing white men and white folks? And I'll say overwhelmingly because I don't think you can win a Democratic primary by being overtly racist like that in most places in the country as a Democrat. But it's probably a virtue in some places, at least, as a Republican. So this it's not new, but maybe it's in this generation. And what does it signify to you about where we're at, and how do we combat that? How do we support you and other instigators? Sorry, it took me 9 minutes to get to that question.
That's fine. Hey, we're having a good conversation.
Listen.
Yeah, well,
could have just said
I think one of the things that it's happening because I always say that the right and specifically white supremacists know who are some of the most powerful fighters against fascism, rising authoritarianism, as Black people, and it's especially Black women. And they know that in a country, like Malcolm X always said this, or he said this once, but people always cite this because it's correct, like most disrespected, disregarded, abused woman is the Black woman. And they know oftentimes they can get away with it. One, they know how dangerous we are in our activism and our strategic smarts. And so they target us. And they also know that many people will not step up and defend us because of the history of racism and sexism, also known as combined misogynoir in this country systemically. And so
misogynoir?
Yes, misogynoir. And it is, oh goodness. Well, yes, I guess I'm getting to educate you on this one.
Not as woke as I thought I was.
So misogynoir is specifically very much the hatred of a specific hatred of Black.
Term coined by Moria Bailey, is that right?
Yes.
All right. In 2010 describes a specific intersection of anti-Black racism and misogyny that Black women experience. It represents the unique structural and interpersonal contempt, prejudice, and discrimination directed at Black women, often perpetuated through stereotypes and media representation. I'm embarrassed to be live and not have gotten it. I'm going to get made fun of now, but bring it. That's what we do it for. So go ahead and explain a little bit more how that's played out as you were.
Yes, so you'll see it played out in the kind of vitriol that is directed at Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley and others when they say things like that people, there are many elected officials. Huh?
Kamala Harris?
Yes, Kamala Harris is a great example. And I do talk a lot about that in the book, where I talk about when she becomes vice president of the United States, everybody's like, what does she do as vice president of the United States? What things, what policies is she going to pass? I'm like, there are 2 constitutional jobs she has. Casting a vote in the Senate, breaking the tie, and stepping in when the guy she serves under is no longer able to do his job and or incapacitated, dead. And that's it. And name any other, and I go into this rant in my book, name any other vice president that you all like, oh, what policies they passed, the things that they have done. You can't pick most vice presidents out of a lineup for a reason, because they're just, and most of them were quoted as saying how much they didn't like the job because they couldn't do the things that they loved doing when they were in other elected positions. So that's one. Number 2, how the media would publish numerous unnamed sources, people who did not have the gall to go on the record talking about the ways in which her office was disorganized and how she was mean. But, you can't say, but I knew personally people in her office. There are plenty of people in her office who went online and said, I had a wonderful experience. Yeah. Office turnover is to be expected when you're working in the vice president's office. It's a tiring job. We're going to be gone after a year or 2. But that wasn't ever taken into question. And the tactics of doing this is to make a Black woman look like she is incompetent. She is disorganized. It is to undermine her in all the ways possible so that it makes it harder for her when she maybe wants to run for president of the United States, to say nothing of the footage talking about how she laughs or how she speaks. My favorite is after the election, I think I quoted the tweet in the book where somebody said, one of the white moderates said, oh, well, she shouldn't have been running for president anyway. She's not an impressive candidate. This is a woman who's won every single election that she ran in, minus the one she ran for president after having to carry have to carry the campaign for 107 days after Biden finally was like, I can't do it after being pushed. And she closed the gap that he had left. We would have lost Senate seats. This is a woman who, yes, she had one presidential race that she didn't pull out because people didn't give as much toward the end. But that's it. Biden had 2 presidential races that he didn't win, and nobody held that against him when he decided to run for the 3rd time. Almost didn't become president and win the Democratic primary until Jim Clyburn put in his name and backed him. So the double standard, even the ferocious nature of how she was treated and disrespected in a way that even I was surprised, there's that Hillary derangement syndrome. I'm like, you aren't even giving Hillary this. This wasn't happening ever when she was in her Senate office or as Secretary of State, trying to undermine her leadership and all of that, but not within her own circles, right? The Republicans were doing what they were going to do. That was to be expected, but within her own circles. That's how Win with Black Women came to be, was in defending Black women who were being considered by Biden as vice presidential candidates, because every time one Black woman was mentioned, like Karen Bass or somebody else as being considered as a potential VP nominee, a slew of negative articles that were just unnamed sources of how they weren't qualified or competent. Meanwhile, they served honorably, gotten elected several times, happened, which didn't happen to the white counterparts who were being considered, women counterparts who were being considered for vice president. As example.
Let me ask you a touchy question, not for me. I have no problem with it because I'll set it up right. Specifically about someone like Jasmine Crockett. She's the one, I guess, that's most prominent in her style. And you know the style I mean.
Yes.
Some people might call it authentically Black, but I interviewed her when she was a Texas legislator. She could do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I love her style. I think her style is very, very effective. Here we go. Here is my white voter. My name is Derek. I like Jasmine Crockett, but I wish she wasn't, I wish she didn't have to talk like that and be so kind of, ghetto. I guess that Derek might not have said that if he's well intended, but some people, I'll say in white folks, maybe some Black people, I don't know, are to some extent uncomfortable with that style of the way that she talks. To me, it's extremely effective. It cuts through a lot of noise. She's a highly intelligent lawyer. She picks her words very carefully. It's poetic. But people are uncomfortable with it for whatever reasons, because their own shit. I don't know. What do you say to people who might be uncomfortable because they don't, relate to a syntax, or they don't think it's as appealing, or whatever else people say? I'm out of hypotheticals because I don't share them.
Stop policing how women, specifically Black women, talk. That's first. To your point, brilliant lawyer, and the people who continuously elected her as a member of Congress don't have a problem with it. And she's getting a lot effectively done and raising the awareness on a lot of things when she was on House oversight that were happening, that were corruption. And honestly, I will also add on the plain spokenness that she has. And that's not an act. I have seen her in private settings where she talks she's a straight shooter and bit humorous in how she straight shoots.
The greatest slam in the history of Congress.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. The greatest clapback in the history of American politics, at least as far as I've seen. Bleach blonde, butch body. I think she must have written it ahead of time, but I want to believe
came so quick.
I want to believe she didn't. And it was in reference to her eyelashes, or her apparently fake eyelashes. She was so locked and loaded. It was the greatest moment I've ever seen in politics. I digress.
Yes. And yes, she is quick on her feet. And what do people need right now? A fighter. And a plain spoken person who, I talk to influencers all the time who, have Elizabeth Booker Squared. A lot of people love to follow her, another Black woman from Tennessee. And one of the interesting things, she says is that people who said, I have never paid attention to politics in my life, just felt it was over my head. And when I listened to you, oh, I get it. I get how I can make a difference. I get what this policy means for me, because she takes all of that legalese and she just breaks it down into like the talk that regular people understand.
Yep. And by the way, I mean, all due respect to Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who's in her 80s, serves Connecticut's 3rd congressional district. I know she's done a lot of good things in her career, but the other day she was questioning Lee Zeldin, the EPA chief, and she was on the side of right, and she knew what she was saying. But I'm sorry, I'd take 10, 20 Jasmine Crockett's, or younger women of color in this case, because of the effectiveness. Frankly, how much harder it is probably to get there to begin with. I mean, not going to find me too many, certainly almost any young-ish black women, this cohort that you 18 to 45, that are pretty effective is what I'll say, communicators.
Yeah.
Or else it wouldn't have gotten there. Because we all know a lot of brilliant people and brilliant black women who are not necessarily great on the microphone or on the spotlight. You know, it doesn't mean they're not brilliant, but that's how you get to be so effective. And you're writing about a lot of them. And I think you are one of them. And I think that matters to be effective is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it does. Absolutely. I mean, if it does not matter if you are super well educated, if what you're saying, it just somebody, their eyes just gloss over. And most people aren't us, who follow this stuff and read this stuff all the time and can understand. Like, they're not going to pour through like a Supreme Court brief and understand what Kagan is saying. They going to need somebody to break it down. What does this mean for me? I know it's bad. Everybody tell me it's bad, but I can't read a legal brief. So what does that mean for me? How can I do something different? And breaking through this news cycle. Good grief. Yeah.
Let me just get to the end of your book. I would talk to you for 10 more hours. And I will. When I'm done with the book, I will rebook when you're done with your initial media. You can join me anytime you want. I love learning from you and reading about all this stuff and talking to you, obviously. But, you know, you talk about how when black women mobilize, and we've seen this in all kinds of different ways across the country, obviously Georgia with Stacey Abrams and the campaign behind Kamala Harris. When black women mobilize, democracy wins. It doesn't always mean that election wins. But where are we right now where are black women in terms of organizing right now? Are you as motivated as ever? What are you seeing for this midterm election? Much less. We're seeing a lot of black women on the ballot for sure, still running and still organizing. But I mean, what is your read right now with where we're at today?
Yeah. I mean, the organizing, I think it's like you quoted your friends well. I'm going to watch some like shows. I'm going to catch up on some books. You know, I got more sleep after the 24 election, but it is then you're like, okay, now I got this energy back. How do I strategically do the work? And, you know, the conversations that I've had, I was at the America Votes conference last week, which is a great conference for a lot of movement leaders, especially black and brown, to come together and discuss elections and previous elections and building like toward a multiracial democracy. And one of the things that I've heard continuously just in my own consulting work is that, you know, a lot of clients, like a lot of black and brown like clients that I've had are talking about not getting the funding that they need to get, that they got in 2020 to do the work, to get folks registered, to get them engaged and turn out and do that persuasion work that, you know, they're not seeing that now. And there was that downturn in 24 in that work for black and brown led organizations, which, you know, I'm sure played a role in them not being able to reach as many people, have the resources to hire that staff, played a role in the fact that Democratic turnout was down, especially in critical black and brown communities. But what I'm also seeing is that, you know, that is kind of concerning. The energy is there. The energy is absolutely there, that Democrats will win. What I am concerned about right now is I want us to not think about winning in election cycles. I want us to think about what is something that we can do to build for long term. And that means funding organizations like a New Georgia Project, like Stacey Abrams started, or I know Black Leaders Organizing Communities in Wisconsin, who are doing this work on the ground daily, annually, not just tied to an election, so that when they do go back to talk about elections, people have that trust and they know that these organizations are working in their best interests, whereas they skeptically look at politicians. And so that is where my concern is, that the work is always going to continue to get done. It's whether people are going to fund it at the levels that it should be funded. And that's what I talk about a little bit in the book too.
Is there any way, I just thought as one more question. And by the way, if you enjoyed my conversation with Atima, you'll like her conversation with Chuck Todd. I'm not a huge Chuck Todd fan, but you just did a show, which I think is great because it's got a huge audience. I hope, and you're on it and talking about this book. But it was really interesting to hear him talk about electoral politics with you, and it's a much different interview than the one that we did, I think. So I highly recommend it. But if you can get past all the ads, good God. No ads on this show. Unbelievable. It just like I'm listening to your conversation with him and I like had gloves on. I was in the garden and I had to like stop every 5 minutes for him to sell a mattress. But my question though is something that you guys referenced on. And again, I don't want to generalize. I know Black women aren't monolithic, but in terms of the Overton window, in terms of where Black women generally are or not, where are you in terms of politics? Because you're seeing the rise of the DSA, the Mamdanis, obviously Bernie Sanders, and he's got a lot of blind spots when it comes to race, obviously, especially with Black women. But you've seen AOC. But I can't think of a lot of Black women that are necessarily identify as DSA. That doesn't mean there aren't everywhere in every state. I'm just me. And so when it comes to those policies, I would think there's a lot of lining up because it's mostly affordability, healthcare, housing, opportunity, and education. And so I wonder about where the Overton window is. And if that's a dumb question because it's so general, then that's fine for you to dismiss it.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the Overton window on affordability as a whole and what that looks like.
No, on like kind of where Black women are with the Democratic Party, with the progressive movement, kind of the issues that they're thinking about advocating for. Again, I don't want to make any assumptions what they are, but along the lines of education and healthcare and opportunity, reproductive rights, racism, Christian nationalism, we can go on.
Yeah. No, definitely. So it's interesting because, one of the other reasons I felt like this book was important in writing is, this current cohort of Black folks, 18 to 45, especially women, when they vote for values that are, progressive, candidates that are progressive, that are going to expand, opportunity, abortion access, you make healthcare more affordable, make the cost of gas and groceries not be so expensive by like starting wars and tariff wars and oil, like
trade wars and hot wars. Great job, guys.
Right. Like all of these wars, so that's definitely, where their mindset is. And yes, they're not monolithic, but the thing that I think is interesting is, I have been friends with Black women who would consider themselves more socially conservative. They're more, church going than I am. They might have even some conservative opinions on things that I would not agree with. But when it comes down to voting and who we vote for, we know that the person, that's why it's like the 92%. And sometimes in some elections, like 94, even higher percent for Black women, is because they know that by and large, the person whose policies are going to further advance, or at least they can have a conversation with that person about further advancing like issues and concerns they have, is usually going to be Democrat. They may be anywhere sort of on the spectrum of like super left, like I'm in DSA, to a lot more moderate, could be part of Third Way, but that experience of being Black and woman.
You're not allowed to say Third Way on the show.
Policies. Yeah.
I said you're not allowed to say Third Way on the show.
Okay, sorry.
That organization is nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm like, yeah.
No, I was pretty sure. I mean, these fake kind of centrist, and then they can find, they can find a Black woman.
They're the ones railing against. They're like, identity politics is terrible. I'm like, whatever. Identity politics made America.
Exactly. America is identity politics. The only people who talk about identity politics are white people. Yeah. Overwhelmingly. It's such a phrase that is used, and it's just so, at this point, a lot of those arguments have become somewhat tiresome. It's kind of interesting in a good way, I think. Yeah. If you look closely. Your book is great. You're awesome. Everybody loves you in the live chat here. We're really excited to connect with you. I was really looking forward to this. I've learned a lot from reading it. It's inspiring and it's good. And people should get behind folks who write books like yours and platforms like yours. Everybody should be listening to your podcast, Embracing Ah, shit.
You're embracing your voice.
It sounds great. Sounds great. I would like to invite myself on it. You only interview Black people, women.
Well, no, I have like women of color. I've had Black women, Latino women, Asian women. I've had a few white women. I can have a day that's like I bring in the white dudes.
Well, my question isn't inviting myself on your. Why no white people? Let's start with this. No, I mean, my thing has been what I learned from, I think, a lot of people, but certainly Kendi early on when this like anti-racist stuff, like the best thing you could do is to platform, Black folks doing good things. That's really, opportunity is the best thing you can do, and not necessarily hand it to your white buddy, just because I played lacrosse with them and all that. But I think that white folks, I have tried very hard to work with white folks who have any kind of platform or job opportunity to try to, teach what I've learned about advocating. I mean, I want to have that conversation with more white people, but that's a white people conversation, not the responsibility of you or anybody else. But that's, I would bring nothing to your podcast, but I will, other than to promote the hell out of it. And I hope everybody will go listen, and I hope everybody will go buy your new book, which is great. And I am really enjoying reading it and getting to know you. Atima Omara, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, thank you. And thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation. Yeah. And I was going to add, you can go to theinstigatorsbook.com for those of you who are in the chat, and you can get cool merch that's like this, The Instigators. There's a fun sweatshirt that says, "For the record, we told you so," and some other really cool merch that kind of accompanies the book. And you can pre-order the book until next Tuesday. And after that, it'll be available in all stores.
I am going to tell you more when I hit stop here, but I'm going to invite you to our live hangout. We do it every Thursday night. We get anywhere between 50 and 80 people. You'll come on, be a guest, answer a few questions. We'll have fun there. We'll definitely have some laughs. But some lucky listener will win some swag, some Instigator swag.
Oh, that'd be fun. I'd love it.
We'll pay for it, but then we'll win it.
Oh, awesome. Love it.
Yeah. Awesome. Go get your swag, and thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everybody for watching live and contributing. That was great.
All right, there she goes, Atima Omara. Let her know that you heard her here. Go listen to her podcast. Most importantly, get the book right now and visit her online. She's got a great website. She is a real smart, successful, savvy business person, networker. And obviously, we can learn a lot from her and the conversations that she's having. And of course, this book, I was so grateful to talk to her, and hopefully I can get her on regularly and we can continue to learn from her. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be back with the full show. John Carroll writes and performs all the music, johncarroll.org. For links to more friends in the stand-up community, go to the scroll down at the end of every episode that I post. You should see links to other folks in our community that are creating cool things like Barry Hummel and Maddie Carlson, and of course, our friend piano tuner Paul with his Substack, other musicians and artists and so on. So if you want to get tagged, linked in the show notes, you can let me know. You listened all the way to the end, so you deserve it, you bumblebee. Okay, I'll be posting more interviews later today, and then we'll get back to the normal sketch later this week, tomorrow. Okay, that's it. Done talking. Bye-bye. I'm just kidding. I'm still here. Okay, now I'm leaving.
You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. 'Tis the place where every lost with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be close up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand